Hi, welcome to Math for All's Teaching Nugget on factoring quadratics when a equals 1. First of all, let me explain to you what I mean by a equals 1. When we see a quadratic and when there's no number in front of the first x squared, that means that a equals 1, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So let's get started. First, I'd like you to take a look at some of these that are factored and then turned into our quadratic equation so that we can take a look and see what's going on here. Notice this first one. I have a positive 6 here and a positive 4 here. I want you to take a look at what is going on with our quadratics. The center term, notice, is 10, which is 6 plus 4, using those numbers that we had in the parentheses. Next one, the 24, is 6 times 4. And we'll notice that this pattern continues whenever we have a factored form of a quadratic into the standard form. Next one, I have a 7 and a negative 2. You'll notice that my middle term here is 7 plus negative 2, and the negative 14 at the end is 7 times negative 2. Last one before we start going backwards and using this as a puzzle. We have a negative 5 and a negative 9. Negative 5 plus negative 9 gets me this negative 14 here. And negative 5 times negative 9 gets me the positive 45 at the end. So when we see something like this, x squared minus 7x plus 12, we need to go backwards and figure out its factored form. Here is the easiest way that I can think of to do this. I like to draw a big X just to keep things organized and simple, and we kind of know what we're going to do. It's kind of a trigger on what we need to do. First up, we're going to take this positive 12 here and put him on the top. Those are going to be things that have to multiply to equal positive 12. Then remember, this middle term here, my factors have to add to equal this negative 7. So I'm going to put him on the bottom here. So now we have to do our puzzle work. The easiest thing to do is to start with the 12. I'm going to start with that 12 and think of factors that multiply to equal 12. We know that we have a 12 times 1. Let's see, 6 times 2. And also, you know it, 3 times 4. Okay, the positive sign in front of the 12 tells me that both of the factors have to be the same sign, either positive or negative. Since a negative times a negative equals a positive, and a positive times a positive equals a positive. Then, the negative 7 here is actually the indication that tells me that both of those factors are going to be negative, and then they're going to have to add up to equal 7. So using that information, can you see which of these terms, if they were both negative, if I put these here, which ones would add up to equal negative 7? You can see it right here, the negative 3 and the negative 4. I'm going to go ahead and put those right here to keep things organized. Our last step, we did the puzzle piece. Now we're going to go ahead and use it to figure out what our factored form looks like. You start with a big parentheses, put in your x here, and then all you have to do is copy down this negative 3 first, start your new parentheses, and then you have x minus 4. If I went ahead and double distributed or FOILed this out, the x minus 3 times x minus 4, I would get back to our original equation of x squared minus 7x plus 12. Great job sticking with that. Let's go ahead and try another one. We have x squared plus x minus 42. So remember our first step for this one, our little trigger point. We're going to go ahead and write our big X here. On the top, we put the last term, remembering to keep that negative sign in the front because that's really important. So we have a negative 42 up here. Things are going to need to multiply to equal negative 42. our middle term, we have this plus x. We don't put x on the bottom, but remember this has an invisible 1, so that means that things are going to have to add up to equal 1. So let's go through 42. Because we have a negative sign in front, we know that one is going to be positive, one of the factors is going to be positive and one's going to be negative. But let's just go through those factors and then we'll use that information to figure out what adds up to 1. So we all definitely know that we have 42 times 1. We have 2 times 21 here. We have 3 times 14, even though that's not one of my math facts, I can get that. Let's see, 4 doesn't work, 5, 6. 6 times 7, and that is it. Okay, so we've got that good information. Now, we know that one has to be positive, one has to be negative, and they have to add up to 1, which means that they're actually getting subtracted. So can you see which ones of these factors are going to add or subtract to equal 1? Yes, it would be that 6 and a 7. Now we have to decide, is the 6 going to be negative or the 7 going to be negative? The way to figure that out is to look at what they have to add up to be. Since they have to add up to a positive number, that positive 1, I know that the bigger number has to be positive, then the smaller number, the 6, is negative. Okay, we just put them in the slots where they go, and then we go ahead and factor them like I had mentioned. Starting with the parentheses, go with the x, take this negative 6, plop him here. Then we start another parentheses, x, plus 7, end my parentheses, and that now is in factored form. Awesome job. It's kind of an interesting little puzzle to do these multiplying and then having to add into different numbers. Let's move on to one more example. We have x squared minus 3x minus 28. We'll go ahead and draw our x. And then we know that we have to have things that multiply to equal negative 28 and things that add to equal negative 3. Remember, the best thing to do is to start with that negative 28. We'll just take it as a positive 28 right now and just get some factors down, knowing that one of those factors will be negative. Let's see, we always can start with our 28 times 1. We have 2 times 14, and then 7 times 4. And that is it as far as things that multiply to equal 28. We know that one's positive, one's negative, and then they have to add up to equal negative 3. So we can take a look at that and see that it would have to be the 7 and the 4. And remember, now we have to use this bottom number here that they have to add up to equal to see which one of these would be positive and which one would be negative. Since the answer has to be negative, the bigger number will wind up being negative, and then this one's a positive. We can check our work. Does negative 7 times positive 4 equal negative 28? Yes. And does negative 7 plus 4 equal negative 3? Yes. Those are the winners. And go ahead and write them here and copy it down. Basically gives us our recipe for the factored form. Take the x and we just put the plus in front here. And there we have it, factored out. Congratulations on learning how to factor quadratics when a equals 1. I'll see you next time as you learn more about math.